Tyler writes, greetings, Spencer and Mr. Klavan. Spencer, I'm glad you were able to bring the founder of the Western canon onto your show just in time for us to laugh through its demise. Venal houseplants are actively trying to gaslight us and erode good parenting. Jen Psaki says that houseplants are saving society. The houseplants seem to gain strength as you hide them in the basement away from sunlight. The good parenting is going out of style. Andrew was the first person I ever heard say divorce was like blowing up a child's planet. And that has made me rethink and uncover a lot of trauma in my life that I neglected. I am forever grateful for that. I think this is a great time to hear what it meant to be a good dad and good parents in Spencer's life. And Spencer, for your part, what moments stood out to you that you appreciated from your parents? And what does bad parenting look like when it's not overly abusive? So a lot of stuff in there, but basically, in the age of no-fault divorce, in the age of fatherlessness and just general kind of confusion, what does good parenting look like?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to ask that question in your presence, since you disprove the fact that
I'm going to fact check. You have a built-in fact check system
exactly.
For your answers.
Exactly.
So off you go, no pressure.
Well, I'm really I'm really glad he mentioned the divorce thing, because that to me is first and foremost. And one of the worst things that divorced people say, and especially when they say it to their children, is we'll still be a family. No, you won't. You have destroyed the family that was the earth on which the planet on which this child walked. It is a terrible, terrible thing to do. I understand that there are moments when it is the only thing to do, but those moments are much, much rarer than people think. So as you know, was fortunate in having married your mother, which only the biggest fool, even I was not a big enough fool to divorce your mother, because she is the most wonderful person on the planet. So that made it easy. But that is the first thing.
I think that's my answer to what makes good parenting.
Yeah, exactly. Marry mom. People always ask me, what's the secret of a good marriage? I say, you got to marry my wife, and too late. Yeah. But no, I do think that really matters. The relationship between your mother and father establish the idea of what love looks like. If you're constantly screaming at each other, if you're not just basically polite, I think that is a basic thing. But then, of course, the other thing, and this is something that many people misunderstand, but it is true, that each of us knows this when he thinks about it. Each of us was made to be somebody. Each of us was made to be a person. And each of us falls short of that every day, but we always can be moving toward it. And when we move toward it, we are happy. And when we are not moving toward it, we are not happy. And when you understand that your child is not there for you, he is there for him. He is there to become the person that God made him to be. And obviously, there are important things that you have to teach. You have to teach honesty. You have to teach authenticity. You have to teach integrity. And you have to try your best to demonstrate those things and admit your failures when you don't. But mostly what you're trying to do is you're trying to let that child become himself without killing himself. In other words, you want the child to be brave, but you don't want him to jump out of a plane without a parachute. It's basically that. But you also want the child to discover himself. And in order to do that, he's got to live in a world that is loving and stable, but also has room to move, because he's going to have to experiment. He's going to have to make mistakes. He's going to have to go down roads and find dead ends and all those things. And so it really is understanding, I think, that the child, there's so many ways that people put this that sounds sentimental and awful to me, and yet are true, which is the child is given to you, by God, and belongs to God, and is trying to find his way to that person that God made him to be. But you can be an instrument in helping him do that. And again, as we were talking about religion clearing stuff out of the way, that to me is what you're trying to do. Don't lie, not because it's naughty to lie, but don't lie because it separates you from yourself, and that's, I think, what you're looking for.
Yeah, one of the non-cringe ways of saying this that I've always loved, unfortunately, I forget who came up with this, but, the Bible talks about children as arrows in your quiver, right? And somebody pointed out that means they have a trajectory, right? Arrows are designed to move in a certain way. And so you don't have complete, you can contort that, you can shoot an arrow into the ground, but in fact there is a target.
Yeah.
And part of your job as the archer is to shoot, toward the target, or to direct the child toward the target. I'm going through marriage counseling right now. When you get married, if you're married in a church, then your pastor typically wants to meet with you and your future spouse a couple times. And this is a really big part of it because you start talking in marriage counseling about what your parents were like and how their relationship modeled marriage for you. And, what did you pick up from that? And so it's been an occasion for me to really, like, not to embarrass you, to be profoundly grateful, of that love that was modeled in our house, right? I mean, that was like, you want to talk about the stability of a planet, right? Like the way that you and mom were committed to one another before anything else that you did, right? You're both wonderful people, of course, but like that visible, just sort of connection between you two is everything. And actually, I have always, even before I met my fiance, even before I met Josh, like I have always remembered that advice that you were giving, I guess yourself and us, like be as polite to your spouse as you are to a waiter, right? Like waiter comes by, they bring you the wrong food. Unless you're a complete jerk, you don't say like, you idiot, like how could you possibly? And yet proximity has a way of breeding contempt, right? Even in people that we love. Yeah. So that was a really big thing. And then this, I think this thing about kind of the questioner asked, what do I remember? And I remember very vividly the just eternally complex process of becoming, sort of realizing that I was a distinct person from you. Because at first your father, if you're a man, I think is kind of like he's the be all and end all, right? God is the father because the father in human life, like, is sort of the representative of God on earth. And I think that, as I went off to college, you were a very spacious parent. Like, I think that's something that I always appreciated, that like I would come home with like a million different versions of ideas that I had got from like my latest reading in Plato or whatever. And you were very open-minded to them. Like open-mindedness is a part, it's just a part of what you're saying, but just like, actually taking seriously when your kid comes home and says, I think that I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be an opera singer, or I want to be whatever. Like, the impulse I imagine immediately is to be like, that's a terrible idea, but with a very few exceptions, and there have been some exceptions, you've usually let me realize that terrible ideas are terrible ideas on my own, which is essential, especially I think if you're raising a man. I think it might be different in some ways for mothers and daughters. But that's been, I think, a great gift to me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to hear that. I mean, as I say, most of this has to do with what a nice person your mother is. But like,
she is really. Have we mentioned how great she is?
It's embarrassing. I mean, it's embarrassing to both of us.
It is. I know.
We're the best she could do, but still, it is this question. If the kid is not going to drive his car through a plate glass window, you do want to let him drive the car. That is the thing you want to do. And it's just, a question of like, do I have the nerve, whatever it is, a philosophy, an action, whatever it is, do I have the nerve to sit here and watch him do what I know can be a disaster, but what I hope will be the path into his future? It takes a certain amount of steely nerve. Yeah.
Yeah. Chutzpah. Yeah. I think Dave Barry, the humor columnist, wrote about his son getting into a car accident. And he said that you have a child and suddenly this part of you moves out into the universe like a shooting star and you have no control, and it's you, but it's not you, and I'm sure that's just a very profound and humbling experience.